I guess the first thing I want to ask is, how would you describe the SV-1 to somebody? If they ask, what kind of car is it? A sports car? Is it a muscle car? How would you describe
All
it?
right, well, the SV-1 was created, I was chairman of Subaru at the time, and I had just started to deal with what federal regulations really meant, because I brought the Subaru first in because we avoided the regulations. It was under 1,000 pounds curb weight. And of course got criticized severely and almost lost the company because Consumer Reports didn't like that idea at all, even though we had great sales because people liked 1297. And then you start really talking about safety and 5-mile-an-hour crashes, no damage, which is not exactly what the car companies wanted or the dealers, because then they lose a lot of money when it comes to fixing a crash. If you can make a couple $1,000s in a 4-mile-an-hour crash, it's better than no damage. That being said, I couldn't understand why they kept saying, if you do safety the way they're dictating, you're going to have ugly cars. And I'm going, that doesn't make any sense. And for some reason, I got this bug. I'm going to build the safest car in the world, and it's going to be gorgeous. Because gorgeous does not cost one more penny than not gorgeous in the car business. So I set out to design with people a car that would be gorgeous. And of course, as soon as you add gold wing doors, it adds something very magic to any car. And I then decided, well, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to build a car that's going to get, I started with, I wanted 25 miles an hour without any damage, until I got explained while I was crashing myself cars into the wall. They said, you know, keep on doing that. And the next thing that'll happen when you have something that firm and it doesn't absorb it, what happens is all the organs in your body go out. So you want 25 miles an hour and you want that body to stay the same, your organs will be out on the windshield. Okay, that didn't make sense to me. We're going to have to change it. And I tend, how do I make something that I can hit and still not have to service? And one day, flying into LA, as the plane was landing, I realized the landing gear is exactly what I'm looking for. So I went to see the landing gear people and said, can I have a 10 mile an hour, 15 mile an hour? What can I have that have no damage and won't hurt the person?
Right.
And they said, we can give you 10 mile an hour. How much is it going to cost? Well, after the tooling, $1.50 for each part, and you need 2 parts in the front and 2 parts in the back. I said, $6? Well, he said, that's not true exactly, because the bumper is going to be more substantial. And you're going to have to build it so it goes into the body, not having the body behind it. So if you look at the Bricklin, there's an airspace all the way around both the front and the back bumper, and at 10 miles an hour or less, it goes in and goes out, no damage. Now, that's not double what 5 miles is, that's 4 times physically more as you go up each mile. And the funny story was, at the time I was 30 or 31, and they were having congressional hearings, bringing in all the people in the auto industry to argue for or against the 5 mile an hour bumper system. So it was me and the lawyers for all the major companies. And they would go and they would tell you all the reasons why you can't do it and the cost and what it would be and the pain in the ass and blah, blah, blah. And then they get to me. And I say, well, I have 10 mile an hour bumper system and there's 3 cars downstairs in case you'd like to see them. And told them exactly what I did. Everybody went, yeah, yeah, yeah. Of course, nothing was ever done and they never passed a law. So you have 5 mile an hour bumper systems, but not 5 mile an hour bumper systems without damage to it. So for some reason, safety became my motive. That's what the SV-1 stands for, Safety Vehicle 1. And my kids were starting to grow up, not yet old enough to drive, but my biggest fear would be one of my children were in a car with our name on it and got into a serious accident and got hurt. That's not okay. So when it comes to vehicles, anything I have anything to do with, especially from the ground up, has got to be the safest car going. And what we're developing now in electric has been now mandated. I want 100 miles an hour into a wall and you walk. To get that, I went to Dan Panos, who happens to be, besides he built his own car, he also builds and designs race cars. And they hit walls at 200 and 250 miles an hour and they walk. The car doesn't walk. Forget about being the car anymore, because it has to take the shock.
Yeah.
And that's what this new car is going to be.
Now, the SV-1 is not just a safety vehicle, it's also a sports car. I mean, it handles, it drives.
It is a sports car because it looks like one and because low center of gravity, so it's fun to drive. And in the beginning, it had the 360 4-barrel American motors, which is a whole other story of why We couldn't continue doing it. With that engine, it was more a sports car, but the idea behind it was safety does not have to be ugly, number one, and beautiful doesn't cost you a penny more than not beautiful. Now, in the auto world, the mission statement is 25,000, well, not at those prices back then, but 25,000 today, which is the same as $5,000 back then, you give vanilla. And as you go up in price, you give more. So to say, wait a second, why don't we start off with beautiful, rides as good as can be, luxurious interior, and we'll sell it for 25? Oh my God, you're going to throw all your profit out and you're ruining the game. So nobody does that. I'm coming from, why not? That's the only place I'm needed. I don't need to be doing what they're doing because they do it as good as anybody else. I don't need an SUV, I don't need a pickup truck. I can have a very cool car that looks really great at a really wonderful price. And nobody's going to compete because it's not to their best interest and they don't give a damn how many I sell.
And that's the other question I wanted to move into is why start a car company? It's so hard. What leads a person to decide what to wake up?
Not knowing any better. If you don't know any better, I didn't know any better. I didn't think it was going to take as long, as hard, as costly, and all the things that were necessary to do. When I started Subaru and became the importer for the Subaru car, I had never sold a car in my life, including my own. You know, I'd give it to somebody else and sell it. You know, and when I went in, it was, okay, I'll take it. So I really didn't know anything about the car industry, and I became an importer. And Fuji didn't know anything about the American market, or they would have known nobody is ever an importer but the factory. Now, 20-some years later, they ended up buying all the stock back from the public stockholders because I'd taken the company public. And they, of course, all the Japanese car companies are owned by the Japanese car companies, the imports. Why do you start one? First, you really don't. You really don't. You can't know. You just really can't know. Otherwise, it's just gone. The second thing is, when the cars were combustion cars, it was much, much harder because you had all the emission rules to meet, which are, forget about that the company that we bought the engines from met the rules. When you put it in a new car, there's a 50,000 mile test that does X amount of miles and this. And if at the last mile you hit a deer, you start all over again. So it's a costly, time-consuming, plus you have to buy it from auto manufacturers who don't want to sell it to you because the amount they're going to sell is insignificant, but the liability is great. And if they don't sell it, they got a new kind of problem, which they had to face with me when they tried to not sell it to me after they agreed. All another story. But that building it with combustion is much, much, much harder. That's why nobody really ever did it. I mean, me, John, and a couple other people, and we all failed for different reasons. Now, electric, you're going to see a lot of startups. Electric changes the game. You don't need other suppliers. You should buy from other suppliers different pieces. Like why somebody would design their own handle is beyond me. And why tool it up when you can go out and buy one that's being built in the millions and they look cooler than can be. The same thing with a lot of little things that people, because the people building cars are people who come from the industry. They're coming from the industry, doing it the way the industry is doing it, even though it's a startup. So they're not really, they don't have the experience to really do it, they say from scratch, but what are they going to build? SUVs and pickup trucks. Yeah. That's their experience. That's what they know. They're going to paint them. How come? Because that's what they do. Right. That's $400 million. So when they talk about building a startup company, I need a couple billion for starters. I have to have at least 1,000 people working for me. And I'm going to design everything myself.
How was it working with American Motors? What led to working with them?
American Motors. I was told by my people that the American Motors 360 4-barrel was available and would give us good performance. And it was a good engine. So our people made a deal with them and we went off and engineered it into our car and did all the safety things necessary. And about 3 months before we're ready to start taking shipments for the delivery, we already had the grand opening, we had 40,000 back orders, we're ready to go. I get notified American Motors will not ship. Will not ship. I just spent $4 million building prototypes and doing the engineering for that engine. And I wanted to buy 1,000 a month. And they're not gonna, That's impossible. I said, get Lundberg. Lundberg won't answer his phone to me. I called the secretary and I said, this is a life and death situation from my part. I need to talk to Mr. Lundberg. I don't want to make threats, but it would really be smarter to meet me now than have to deal with the press and the lawyers later. Message back, all right, you cocksucker, be here tomorrow at 11 o'clock.
Lunenburg said that to you.
Yeah, that's his message to me. All right. Remember, I'm 30 years old, 31, and I'm being arrogant. I'm desperate. It is not a fun gig. I mean, I can't go find another engine and re-engineer it, and go, can't happen. Can't happen. I'm out of business. I'm going to lose a lot of money. So finally, so Lundberg said, be there tomorrow. So I bring my vice presidents. We come into his office. He has his vice presidents. I go through the story. We had your word. We did the engineering. We are not financed where we can just change it and do everything. We've set up dealers. They're expecting it a certain date. He said, well, let me tell you a story. He said, the 360 comes from Jeep. I have been here a long time trying to sell cars. It's been hard. I can sell every single car I can build right now. That was a time when, for some reason, cars were walking out the door faster than you can build them. He said, after all these years, every time I sell you an engine, I lose a car sale because I really can sell every car. If you think I'm going to sell you engines so that I can't sell my cars, you're out of your mind. I said, well, let me tell you my story, because I'm not going to be out of my mind. I'm going to be out of my business, and I'm going to lose a lot of money. So what you're doing is pushing me out that window. And if I have to do that, I'm grabbing your tie because I'm landing on your stomach when we land. Here's what I'm doing. You don't give me what I want, I go out the door, I get on a plane, and I go to Washington. And I don't leave Washington until they know you're in a conspiracy with the other big three, putting me out of business. And here's my contract, and here's what they did. It's not the way I want to do business, but it is the way I'm going to save my ass if you don't give me what I want. And then he started in, I won't say what he said. I forgot we're talking to the
Come on, I want to hear it.
Well, you cocksucker. Who the hell do you think you are? I mean, you little, and on and on and on. And I said, I don't blame you one bit. What are you going to give me? He said, I'm going to give you 700 cars. And after 700 cars, go fuck yourself. Thank you so much. I apologize for any rudeness you may have gotten from me, but you were dealing with a man who's desperate. And I appreciate you recognizing that and giving me the opportunity to save my ass. I left. Now, we're going to get 700 cars, which is going to be enough for us in the beginning to get everything right. I need another engine. I still got to do everything I said. I fly into Livonia, where we had our offices, and I was meeting with Keith Crane. Keith was mad at me because I wouldn't let anybody come in and see what we were doing. And one of his reporters snuck into the garage that we were building prototypes with a camera, and my people took the camera and broke it. And he said, how could you not let automotive news? I said, what the hell do I give a damn for automotive news now? I said, I'm not showing anybody, this is before we had their showing, anybody about anything we're doing right now. And you guys ought to respect that. He said, no, we don't respect that. We're in the business of reporting. We need to get the information. And if you were smart, you'd cooperate with us because we can do you a lot of good. And he said, why is Hal Sperlich waiting in your waiting room? I said, who's Hal Sperlich? Got that? I didn't know who Hal Sperlich was. He said, he's Iacocca's right-hand man. Iacocca was at Ford. No kidding. Great. I don't know either, but I'll tell you, Keith, it was nice talking to you today. I probably will listen to you, but I got to go get Hal. Hal comes in. How are you, man? He said, Lee sent me to check out and see what you're doing. I said, be happy to show you anything you want. He said, it's a funny thing, too, I said to him. I've been thinking about giving you a call because we're building the car in Canada, and I understand the Windsor 351 is built in Windsor. He said, you're right. I said, you know, if we can work out a deal, I'll switch from American Motors to the Ford engine. Oh, he said, great. Go, and I show him the thing, and he meets everybody, he sees what we're doing, and he gets excited. What a cool thing. He said, okay, you got a deal. So we made a deal to buy the engine from Ford with 1,000 cars a month. Now, I'm feeling extremely happy, and fortunate enough that Keith told me who was out there, because I would have never had the slightest idea. And we re-engineer everything, and it is now December, about near the end, right before Christmas season, and we're getting the first shipment in January, and we're going to start shipping cars. I'm in the LA airport with my wife and 3 kids, at the time only 3, and first wife, and we're on the way to Acapulco for a 2-week Christmas vacation. And I get a call from the office. We have a problem. Ford's not going to ship us engines. No, that can't be. It cannot possibly be. What in the world could they possibly imagine? Sperling was too nice a guy. The negotiations were very pleasant. Something's wrong. So I call Hal Sperling, no answer. Call Lee Iacocca, no answer. I call Henry Ford, I say no answer. Nobody's returning the call. I'm sitting in the VIP room at the LA airport waiting to go to Acapulco. I had just flown in from Scottsdale, where I was living at the time. And I start putting out my messages. Call me back in an hour, or you'll read about it in the paper. Hal calls me. What's wrong, Malcolm? What's wrong? I just got told I got no engines. Well, let me get back to you. I said, not too long, because either I'm going on a plane to Acapulco or I'm going on a plane to Washington. One of those 2 things, and I got to know before the plane gets here. I'll get back to you. Calls back, he said, I know the problem. It was a lawyer problem. They decided it was too much risk against what could the possible return be. You're going to buy them all? Big deal. We spill that many engines. I said, yes, I know. And if you don't sell me, that's exactly what I'm going to tell them. They spill that many engines, but they wouldn't sell it to me after I spent the money for engineering, re-engineering the whole damn thing. He said, yeah, I know that's really tough. I said, please don't make me have to do, I don't want to be into how do I mess and rile up everybody, because I don't believe what I'm about to tell them is true. I think it's exactly what you told me. He said, I'll get right back to you. Came back, he said, Lee says, no problem, you got the engine. And I went off to Acapulco. Truly amazing. The end of the story with all this Washington nonsense, the premier pulled the plug on us, and I'll get into that story, but right now, he pulled the plug on us, and we're going to have to declare bankruptcy, because all our money is tied up. We have orders, we have everything else, but without a factory, and I don't have time to go to Ireland, who had come to us, and start all over again. Plus, I didn't want to go to Ireland. They were killing people there, and I didn't think that was exactly how to build a great quality car. I was having enough time in Canada. So, wow. I'm thinking back to those days. It's absolutely amazing. Give me a minute. It's really fun to think about the stuff that we had to go through to get to a car going out. Anyhow, so we're about to go, we're going to have to declare bankruptcy. And I get a call from the FTC. Could they come see me? Sure, they came in. They said, Mr. Bricklin, we don't think that failure was 100% on your own. I said, well, it happens to be. I'm in charge of the company. If it failed, it's my fault. If it succeeds, it's a lot of people's fault. They said, yeah, well, we think there's conspiracy going on. I'm going, this is a time when everybody was loving to talk about breaking up the big 3, which is why, by the way, I was using it all the time to get what I wanted from them. So they said, we'd like to make you a deal. We'll finance all the lawyers' costs to sue the big 3. And what will happen is you'll end up getting a bunch of money, because they're going to settle, not maybe, positively, and we'll get another needle in there. Look what they did to the poor guy. They put him out of business. They dropped that money on the floor, and on and on and on and on. So I said, I'll let you know tomorrow. He said, what do you have to wait for? There's no downside. You're going to go bankrupt. You're going to lose everything. You're personally guaranteed on everything. He said, or with our thing, it stops the bankruptcy. You'll have enough money to pay off all the creditors and walk away with some money. He said, just let me talk to you tomorrow. I went home and I said, this is very tempting. This gets me out of, it ain't my problem. It gets me no loss for anybody on the thing, especially me. But it's not the truth at all. I'm not going to do it. No, I'm not that nice a guy. So I'm not sure why it is I decided it was important not to do something that I knew was not right. Even though they could afford it, nobody was really going to give a damn. The lawyers would get their hero badges for messing with the big three. I told them the next day, and they just could not get over it. What, are you out of your mind? I said, probably. But I think it's a lesson I better learn, because if I do this, I'm not even going to take any kind of responsibility for what happened. And that truthfully isn't, I didn't know what I was doing. And I'm sure I made a lot of mistakes. Anyhow, the end of the story is we went bankrupt. I lost a lot of money.
Back to AMC, I know some of your front suspension components came from American Motors. What was the story behind that?
Well, we were buying as many pieces as we can buy. I'll give you another story to show you how people who are attracted to doing a startup, especially in today's world in the car business, instead of taking advantage of the fact that there's so many mundane things that you'll never see that are being built and engineered beautifully and built in the millions that you can buy off the shelf. And you don't have to do the tooling, you don't have to do the designing, but the way it works, you have a designer who does handles. That means he has to design a new handle every year. And that costs a lot of money and tooling and that, and you can make a mistake when you do something new, but they insist on doing it. I got a call from somebody at Faraday a couple of years ago. And I was starting to read, Faraday was funded $1 billion. And they said, could you come out to California? We'd like to talk to you. I said, well, I've been reading about you, but I don't know what you're really doing, because there's no pictures of cars, there's no really anything. But why would you call me? Well, distribution man. I said, well, if you know me, I also never worked for anybody. I pushed an ice cream cart when I was a kid, and I mowed lawns, but I never worked. I said, I'm not sure I'd be a good employee. And I'm really not interested anyhow. Well, why don't you come out and let's talk? You can almost name your price. I said, okay, let me ask you a couple questions. How much money did you raise? I think it was $1 billion too. How many people you got working? No. How soon before you'll have your first prototype? He said, well, we're still working on the concept. Okay, so we're on the concept part of designing the car. Didn't I hear that you're building a factory in Nevada? Oh yeah, we're building a $700 million factory in Nevada. You don't have the product though yet? No, okay. And how many people you got working? 1,000. I said, you have 1,000 now? Not assembly people. Yeah. No, you don't need to see me. I said, why not? I said, because by the time I land, you'll be out of business. How can you have 1,000 people doing what? Whatever they're doing is wrong. They're spending money. Forget the people. They're spending money that you shouldn't be spending. I said, where you're at now, 100 people or less is all you should have.
It's a disaster waiting to happen.
So, of course, they ended up going out of business first time and closed the factory or closed the project, and went out and, believe it or not, got another $1 billion or $2 billion and opened up in LA and got a big warehouse they're going to turn into a factory. And I still don't know exactly what the hell they're building. My point is, that's the way you do it. And that's why they're so damn expensive to do. And that scares people from doing it. And of course, everybody's got to put in a paint facility, and that's $400 million now.
I wanted to ask, you talked earlier about paint, why you don't want to do paint. Tell me, the short version of why you chose not to paint your cars.
$300 million. That's the short version. Now, what do you replace that with? I had it look beautiful, and I'm into finding ways to not have aftermarket sales, which is contrary to smart business in the auto industry. You want to have it, you want the dealers to have it. I want them to make money full tilt on the car, and don't want them to worry about service. Not because I am against us all making lots of money. I don't like to inconvenience my customer. I don't like to stop for gas. I don't want to stop and give it to them for service, no matter what they give me. I don't want to do that. And so anything I can do to make it so that you don't have service, I'm happy camper. So I had two problems. How do I do that with a body? Because if you have fiberglass and it hits it, it just runs. And it crinkles up. And if you have steel, it crinkles. So I need color, and I don't want it to be damageable. That's a pretty interesting problem. And I met with some people from Roman Haas, and they made plastic for bathrooms, sheets of plastic to put on the wall instead of tiles. And that's solid acrylic. That's solid paint. So I said to him, well, how do you do? What do you do? You vacuum form it. And then you, for what we need, reinforce it with fiberglass. And what will you get? The color, which is impregnated, it's the whole sheet. It's a sheet of acrylic. 50 years from today will look exactly the same. If you scratch it, you buff it. And what's really cool, if you hit it hard enough to make a damage, the damage is a clean hole. It doesn't crinkle. So you can take the hole and put it back in and then buff it. Oh my God, I got a body that won't damage, basically, and it's going to look great forever, and I don't need to spend $400 million on a factory. And they had 5 colors, that's why I have the colors I got. That's what they gave me, period, on that.
So you didn't pick the colors, they just
I
gave you.
named them Safety Red. I hated the vomit, I called it that. Vomit is not the green, but there was an off-color, greenish, vomity looking thing. That was my 5th color. The white looked really good. The red looked really good. I didn't love the orange, and I didn't love the green, but they looked good going down the street, and all together they looked like gumdrops. So it worked out really good. Yeah.
So, and why the name? And they were all just safety red, safety orange.
It was a safety car. We didn't have an ashtray in there and a lighter. I had given up smoking. And the truth of the matter is, when you smoke, you go over and get it lit. It's a safety car. I didn't want you as lighting a cigarette and running into a tree someplace. So I didn't put it in. I got told by a lot of people who ended up involved in dealerships that were servicing Bricklin that for some reason in the Bricklins that came in, there'd be one of those pouchy kind of ashtrays underneath the seat, usually with a joint in the thing. For some reason, that seemed to conguire around the Bricklin when it came into service.
So smoking
And that was not
dangerous,
okay
and
then.
Smoking a joint is
You're right, it was okay to not smoke it and not have an ashtray, but how about if we smoke a joint? Not cool.
why? And I know we could probably talk about it all day, but I mean, why did things not work out?
Simple story. And by the way, although I've told the story in the beginning to people, reporters, for some reason they don't like they should love the story, but they don't ever write it the way it's really the truth. But one day I got invited to a musical being put on in New Brunswick that, by the way, ran for 3 years, called Bricklin, an Automotive Adventure. It was a musical that they had written, and for some reason the people got the facts right. And here's what the story was there, and here's what the story was. We're building the car. We're building it with people who never built a car before. So we're talking about people who are into fishing and cutting lumber. But it was just not a very complicated thing that we were doing. And they were eager, and we were paying really good wages. So they were really happy. There was a small problem that if you worked 3 or 4 months in Canada at the time, you could get a year unemployment. So every 3 or 4 months, we'd have 80% turnover. Good way to build a car. All right? So I went to the UAW in Toronto and asked them to unionize me, hoping and telling them why. I need a discipline that these people understand it's better to get what I'm paying them than go after this unemployment because they're not going to be able to come back. Why would you throw this opportunity to make a living for not ever, but for a long time, compared to getting paid 3 months and then getting whatever they give you? So they came in. It didn't help us, by the way, but anyhow, they came in. Now, I got very close to the premier. He was giving us money to bring us there because of the attention the province would get, because nobody heard about New Brunswick. So the deal was, you'll get all the attention, and I'll get the money. Hi, how are you? I'll get what I need. We got close. I had great admiration for the man. I considered him one of the real good international politicians. Smart, independent, not hooked up with anybody. I mean, just paid attention to doing the job. And we'd be on TV shows everywhere, so he was getting what he wanted. Then at the height of his popularity, he comes into the office and he says, I need 3 Bricklins. Sure. What do you want it for? He said, I'm calling an election. He said, the first car is going to come get the crowds. Second car is coming with my mother in it. Third car is coming with me. And he did. And of course, it was reported all over Canada. And the night of the election, he won with the largest landslide ever recorded in that part of Canada. The front page of all the papers had a Bricklin with the doors up and him flying out of the top with the Superman uniform on, and headlines, Premier wins the Bricklin election. I'm going, da-da-da-da-da. I got this place knocked. Whatever I want, I'm going to get. And that's the way it seemed to work out. Things are going along. We're starting to do the quality problems. We have back orders that could take us 5 years to ever supply. And as soon as people are loving the car, not some of the quality problems that we're fixing. Okay, one day the Premier comes walking in the door. Malcolm, I got to see you alone. Now understand, we had gotten close, really liked each other, go out to dinner, even went to Acapulco on a vacation with my kids together. He said, I'm closing it down. Now, they have 25 million invested, which is a lot of money back then. They know we have back orders up the kazoo. He's getting all the publicity. He just won an election with that in 3 months beforehand. This has got to be a joke, which I said, I'm really not going to take you seriously, but why even make a joke? He said, it's not a joke. He said, let me tell you why. He said, I've given it a lot of thought, you can imagine. He said, we won the election, and it was a great landslide. And every day of my life since, when I want to go talk to the press about anything, they have two questions. How's Malcolm and how's the car? They don't want to hear anything else. And it's never going to ever stop. I figure I stop and get rid of this thing. I wait another year, I call another election, and then I own it, not you. I said, are you serious? He said, yeah. And we went bankrupt. And a year later, he called another election, and he won. That was the end of that story. And I got to lose lots of money, almost all my Subaru stock. He was popular because of the car. Well, in Canada, you have two parties, and if you're not in one, if you're in this one, you hate the people over here. I mean, it's worse than anything over here. I mean, bah. So there were people who wouldn't go to work at the factory because their father came from another party. So that happened, but that wasn't a serious problem. The big problem was exactly what I told you. Everybody knew it. It wasn't it wasn't a secret thing, but for some reason, it never got written about like that. They talked about we didn't have sales. We had more sales than we knew what to do with it. They were getting so much money over a list, it was embarrassing. So it had nothing to do. It did, to stay in business would have required us to fix the little problems that were big problems. And when they say the doors leak, they didn't leak. When you have a door up, it rains in. No matter what you want, doesn't matter how you seal it, that's what happens. And in the beginning, we had hydraulic doors. Until one day, we're selling cars now. You push a button, the doors open up. You push a button, the doors close. But you got to hold the button. One day, I'm in Marin, Pennsylvania, where I lived, and I go out, it's raining. I go out to get in the car. I push the button. 6 seconds for that door to open. You know what 6 seconds is in the rain? 6 seconds to close the door. Because if you go too fast with the hydraulic, you'll cut your hands off if you had your hand in the thing. That's 12 seconds in the rain. Oh my God. This is impossible. I would never do that twice. I wouldn't do it once if my name wasn't on the back of the car. Oh my God, what am I going to do? Tell me what I'm doing. My cars are going out the thing. That's what's coming off the line right now. And there is no other solution. And it took a year for us to figure that one out, by the way. So I call a friend of mine who's an inventor in Texas, Frank Turner, genius. He said, get on a plane and get here right away. I said, go out there and push the button. And while you're pushing the button, I want you to know it's pouring on your head. He closed it. He said, okay, give me the keys. He said, I'll be back in a week. He took the car and he drives it to Graham, Texas. And a week later, I fly back to Livonia. And we walk up to the car. He said, push the button. Push the button. It goes, whoop. Push another button. It goes, whoop. Stops 6 inches above and then closes. Oh my God. How much is this going to cost to do? He said, nothing. What do you mean, nothing? I look around, the hydraulics are there, but that wasn't hydraulics. He drained the hydraulic out, filled it with air, we had a square beam, which was our frame for safety in there, and the engine builds air. Filled up the thing, that was air. Boom. So all you had to do is take out the hydraulic, hook up a few things, and I have perfect air doors. Safety, boom, stops here, everything perfect. We went out of business before we put it into, but all the people who bought cars ended up changing it to that with the people who were servicing cars. So I would say 90% of the cars on the road have that, but not one ever came off the production line.
Right, a friend of mine has switched over to air.
Yeah, you can't
Right,
not. You
perfect.
can't not.
Now looking back after it's all been said and done, what do you think the legacy of the SV1 is?
I lost more money doing the SV1 than everything I ever lost in my entire life, but got me more credit and made my life 10,000 times easier because of it. And if it didn't fail, I wouldn't have had all that. Don't ask me how come that happens that way, but I'm known for that car. I mean, Subaru, all that, it's interesting, but the car was what people remember. And they made a $20 silver coin. There's a Canadian Bricklin coin. There's a Canadian stamp. I got a notice from the post office department who does, and there's a Bricklin credit card. And they told me, I got a credit card, you have a stamp. And I thought they were going to tell me how much royalty I'm going to get. And then finished it with, and if you'll just give us your order, we're going to give you free shipping. That's my royalty from the post office of Canada.
So that car, you said, has done more for you.
It's done me more good. And the truth of the matter is, looking back, the best thing that ever happened to me is I got put out of business in a way that I really had nothing to do with bad business. It was totally politics. He put me into politics, and politics screwed him and closed it down. But the truth of the matter is, if it was successful, let's see what I would have ended up with. I'm building that car. Now, no matter how beautiful a car is, no matter how many people like it, you got to change. It just gets old. It just gets boring. And when you build too many of it, it loses the mystique. You take a Ferrari that, let's say they build 1,000 of. Oh my God, here's $2 million. You take that Ferrari and you make 10,000 or 50,000 or 100,000 in Ferrari red, nobody gives a damn. So what? It's the numbers. You can take a really piece of crap car and only build a few of them and it has a bigger value. It's just the way it is. Or take the doors away and you got a normal car. I mean, people don't get it, but it's the door. If you're not going to spend billions of dollars in advertising against the people who are spending billions, you better have something that's going to draw their attention and get some kind of value, or you're not going to. And to me, I've always seen it's always the doors. That's why the next car is going to have scissor doors. It gets rid of the leaking when it's open and still gives a sex appeal. Take those doors away, and take the ugliest car you ever saw and put some cool doors on it, and you got yourself a cool car. I mean, it's that simple. That being said, there are problems. No matter how smart you are, no matter how well you engineer it. Musk, 10 years ago, I get a call from Eberhard, who was the real founder of. Oh yeah, so he called, and he said, listen, Musk and I would like to spend some time talking to you, if you don't mind. When is the next time you'll be in California? I said, well, my youngest son is a water polo champion, and there'll be some Junior Olympics trials out in Ontario, California, so I'm going to fly in for that if you'd like to meet me there. Okay, great. Now, all I knew about it was they did the Lotus convertible, which I thought was the dumbest idea I ever heard in my life, to buy a car in England, ship it over here, rip it all apart, and put in your stuff. Wow. I can't even imagine how bad that is in my opinion at the time. So we had a meeting, and one of my sons, who had been filming everything I was doing, was filming this meeting. In fact, I told him, go find that film. So we spent about 3 hours talking. And they told me about where they were going, that they had learned from the convertible thing. Great. And they asked advice on a number of things. Here's what they were doing. They're going to build their own dealerships. They bought the factory, a great factory, except it's a big factory. And when you have a big factory, you got to fill it up with stuff. And that all costs money when you fill it up with stuff. And they're going to have it all automated, and it's going to be sold like an Apple, and they're going to build their dealerships like an Apple. And I said, well, listen, everything you just talked about requires a lot of money. And one of the things I learned in the car business is how to do it with the least amount of money. And the way I did it was, as many parts as you can buy from someplace else, you do. The parts that don't matter, the parts you can't see and that you're going to get in large numbers, and they've already been tested. They're good quality, they're good safety, they're good all those things, and you don't have to do anything to do them. That's what I would do. And as far as automation, let me tell you a little story that I learned about how you build a car. You can have all your automation you want. At the end of the line, there's somebody who goes around it to check on how wide the spaces are. And sometimes it's less than 1/8 of an inch off. Do you know how they fix it? They take a rubber mallet and they go boom, and it's fixed. Now that sounds antiquated. Do you know what you do if you're fully automated? You go back to the very beginning and change every machine. Because it's not that that's the problem, it's over here that's the problem, and the machines only know what they're told, and you have to change them all. And then that happens again, boom, you go do it again. It is not to good production to go have fully automated in all the spots. There are some places, welding and few, that is a really smart idea. No, we're doing it that way. Okay. Now, let's talk about money. When I build a car, somebody ships me in some supply. They usually give me at least 30 days, in some cases 60 and 90 days. It comes, I put it on the car, and when I'm ready to put it on the car carrier, I make out the bill of origin, I put it in the bank, and the bank takes it out of their floor planning. Before they get the car, and before I have to pay the bill, I have money in my bank. Let me tell you what happens your way. You get it here and you have to pay them when it's time, then you ship it to yourself. You have to finance that. You have floor planning that costs interest to pay back over here, but if you don't do that, then you just have more money. And then you have to trade them in. You know all about trade-in? Here's how it works. The person on the floor who's going to appraise the trade-in wants the trade-in to be as high as he can to make the sale. That's what the customer wants. And that's what he does. He gets his commission. Now you have to sell it. Now you're going to get the true value. So what you had on the books, which you financed, you didn't get the cash. Now your cash profit is sitting, and not just your profit, is sitting on the floor at a lower price than you have it there. So sometimes you don't even want to sell it because you have to take it off as a loss on your book. You're getting down a very slippery road. It's just not, in my opinion, the way you want to go. Plus, it's against the rules in a lot of states. Why?
That's a whole other story. The whole
Because the dealers are protecting themselves from the factories coming in and putting them out of business with factory stores, which they would do. So you're going to have to fight that. On top of all that, all you're talking about is costing more money, killing yourself with inventory. For what reason? I want to do it like Apple. This is not a cell phone. And it is true, by the way, when you have a cell phone, if it doesn't work, you become irate. Go ahead and have a car that didn't cost you $500 or $1,000, that cost you $50,000 or $100,000, and tell me that you couldn't get a windshield wiper, or you couldn't get the right tire, or you couldn't get a button for the radio, and watch what fury you get out of there because they can't drive that car. We're doing it. So we did. And what did he do? He got more valuation than everybody else in the auto world. Ford and Chrysler, he's in some cases 2 and 3 times more valuable. And there were certain times he was more valuable than General Motors. All of them were making billions, and he never made any money. So my hat went off to him big time, and realized he did the thing in the car business nobody ever figured out how. He came in, he built a product that was not smart and failed, but found a way to have enough money to keep going, because that's where he would have been out of business in anybody else's normal startup business thing. He figured a way to get people to keep giving him money, and that is an incredible, incredible job. And my hat is off to, and he built a great car. Well, you don't get better than building a great car, and you don't get better than having, he's worth 10, 12 billion, never made a money in 14 years, and he had enough money to finance us doing any damn thing he wanted to do. So we got to pay for the mistakes.
Yeah.
That's a big problem. Most people can never get over. I learned from that. So what I'm doing has those elements that I absolutely thank him for his leadership in showing that it can be done that way.